Great day, Doug. Great day, Daniella.
Well, hey there, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Ryan Edwards. I'm on the Community Impact Team at United Way of Central Ohio, where I lead our student success work, which covers our relationships in early care and education, high school graduation, and some emerging work called Success by Third Grade. Our conversation today will cover how our community is rallying around our youth, things that organizations are doing to help kids and families through the pandemic, and work that's happening to shepherd local students along the path toward high school graduation. As we all know, the past couple of years have been trying times for schools, educators, service providers, families, and kids. And many of you have experienced that in some way in your own home, your own community, through virtual school, quarantines, debates around health and curriculum. There are many folks who are experiencing outside of school challenges like housing and food instability, employment difficulties, and increases in mental health challenges. All of these things have been present for a very long time. They're not new, but have certainly been amplified during the pandemic. And what we've seen is that the disparities that have historically existed in education along racial and socioeconomic lines are widening because of COVID-related challenges. Just to paint the picture really quickly, by the numbers, the state of Ohio education report card was recently released. It shows that at a state level over the past 2 years, chronic absenteeism is up about 6% statewide. Third grade reading proficiency has decreased by about 15%, but the 4-year high school graduation rate has seen some improvement by a few percentage points. So there are some bright spots that we want to point to in the data. And of course, when broken down by race, we see disparities for communities of color in each of these categories. Today, we're excited to be joined by leaders of local organizations serving students in Central Ohio. In conversation, they'll share more about themselves and their work, highlight bright spots, talk about some of the things that we should be celebrating together, discuss some of the challenges and opportunities they see, and share some ways that we can come together to support their critical work. With that, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Elizabeth Martinez, President and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Ohio, to introduce herself and dive into conversation with our panel. Had a chance to connect with all of these folks earlier in this week. Really excited to bring this group of people back together to learn from you all, and excited about a lively conversation with the five of you. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll go from there.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ryan. Excited to be here. I really appreciate United Way convening us today for this really important conversation. As you mentioned, I'm the leader of this organization, this amazing organization here, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and we're at the center of the discussion happening in the youth development space. We believe that mentorship, that relationships are really critical as we think about some comprehensive solutions to some of the challenges that we're seeing young people and their families face in the community. So I'm excited to be amongst friends here on this call, great leaders who are really standing up great work and meaningful work here in the community. And I just really want to kick it off. There may be some individuals on this call today that have not interacted with some of the organizations represented here, and most importantly, the leaders that are represented on the call today. So I'm gonna kick it off with Daniella sharing a little bit about your background and how do you come to the work that you're currently doing at All That. Share that for the benefit of the larger group here.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Daniella Hicks, and I'm the Executive Director of All That, Teens Hopeful About Tomorrow. I'm excited to say that we have served teens since 2010. We're on the east side of Columbus at Livingston and Elaine. We recently purchased our facility so that we can do even more to help move the needle and provide more services to teens here in Columbus. So good morning to everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Daniella. Doug?
Thanks, Elizabeth, and Ryan and United Way for hosting this. I'm Doug Wolf, CEO at Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Ohio. I've been here not quite 6 years in this seat, a little more than a year. We provide high quality year-round out-of-school time programming, and we've been operating in person throughout the pandemic across our 7 sites in Columbus, Marion, and Newark. Elizabeth, my background is actually healthcare, and I arrived here because the work we do in organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs and Big Brothers Big Sisters and all that and others is public health and healthcare. So that's the approach I take, and I think we're doing incredible things here. And again, just thanks for having us today.
Excellent. Jasper?
Great day, all. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hopefully you guys can hear me here. Jasper Person of Taylor Fit Education Consulting. Do a lot of work embedded in the schools and school districts, obviously around Central Ohio there, with the educators and administrators in the space, too. A lot of family engagement and student engagement work, kind of connecting the dots and tailoring it to fit the needs of the communities and schools that we service there. And so I'm extremely excited about being here. We do a lot of work specific to the African American male, and so that's kind of a foundational pillar point for our work and what we do as a founding member, also and board president of the Masters Preparatory Academy as well. So thank you for having us today.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, I'm certainly thrilled to be able to showcase the work that is happening across all of our organizations. I want to dial back a little bit to something Ryan shared earlier, because I know, you know, for all of us on this call today, some of what was shared is probably not a surprise to our organization. The conversation happening in the space of chronic absenteeism, the reality of the circumstances around reading for young people in our community. And even though there is a bright spot to talk about in the context of the 4-year graduation rate, there's a reality that exists in that story as well. And that speaks to the disparities that still exist amongst groups that we are very engaged in providing support to. And so I want to, you know, toss a question out to the group in terms of your reaction to the data, you know, raw reactions from the team here. How are you thinking about this in the context of your work? So, you know, I'll kick it off to whoever wants to start, and we'll kind of do a little bit of a round robin feedback engagement from the group. Daniella, you're ready to share with us. Tell us.
Okay, so when I heard the data, I was pleased to hear that our students are graduating and that rate is increasing. So as I dug into the numbers, what I found is that so many of them are not prepared for success. And that's the piece that's really important to me. So our program focuses on 3 areas. The first is academics. We want to make sure that our students, that they engage in the classroom and that they're passing their classes so that they are eligible for graduation. But we also want to make sure we expose them to careers so that when they graduate, they know what's out there, and that they're prepared for the next steps in life. We also want to deal with some of the social emotional pieces that our students have been challenged with. You know, our students, you know, they struggle in the classroom, and so they struggle with attendance pre-COVID. But now that they've spent so much time in a virtual platform, just getting them out, getting them to engage positively, that's been a challenge for a lot of our students. And where we see, you know, we really need to support our families right now.
Yeah, I agree, Daniella. I think that conversation around preparedness, being able to dial into those social emotional supports, I know all the organizations represented here really anchored in that, in their interventions. You know, I'm going to toss it over to Doug for a moment, and as we kind of unpack a little bit the disparities, I wanted to highlight some of the percentages of the representation of different groups within that 4-year graduation rate. So we have 90% of white students graduated in that 4 years, you know, the 2020 data, compared to 76.9 of Black students, just a little over 78% of our Latinx student population, and then 79.8% of Indigenous students, Doug. So when you hear that that reality, what comes up for you in the context of the work of Boys and Girls Clubs?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. When we hear the graduation rate climbed a bit, I suspect most people are surprised. I was a bit surprised. I think with any data point, in particular graduation rates, we need to have conversation with the data on what that means. Certainly, we can celebrate the increase, and we would hope that those increases are a result of higher student achievement. But we also have to consider the other things that could be happening. Are lower performing students dropping out of the public school system and going into dropout recovery or online charter schools? Are lower level alternatives being taken advantage of, and maybe some practices that quote push kids across the finish line, right? And to Daniella's point, graduation, the diploma itself is not the goal. It's what the diploma should represent, and that's a young person who's prepared for success post-secondary, whatever his or her pathway might be, college, trade school, vocational school, whatever it might be. And to your point with drilling into the demographic data, clearly there's an issue, right? We need to look at the system approach. We often look at the individual approach and how do we help this young person get across, but how are we setting up a system that allows a young person to be successful? And one challenge, I think, is we have moved upstream in many initiatives, but the stream is very long, right? We can't pull kids out of the stream upstream and then tell them to walk along the steep bank until they get to the end, because all along the way there's opportunities to fall back in, and I think we're missing those along the way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. That conversation of going upstream, we don't start having a discussion around high school graduation at high school. We're thinking about that continuum of engagement for young people. And so I'm curious, Jasper, as as we dial into that discussion around the upstream dialogue that not only are we having in the community, but we really should be having more of in the community. How do you think about this in the context of your work? That upstream discussion, how are you leveraging your resources, your intervention to really dial into that?
Yeah, so I think on a few different levels within the workspace, I'm going to specifically speak about the work that we're doing with our African American males with our Ubuntu Leadership Institute, which really focuses on the ability to help our young men see themselves where they are, but to see themselves from a different perspective, and then exposing them to, and somebody said, I think, like you said earlier about mentorship, right? Exposing them to individuals who are actually in the process of the engagement in spaces that they actually desire to be and are connected to with their interests and gifts. And so allowing for our young men to understand the systems as well. It's important that we do a lot of training around uh, personal and professional development with our young people. So the same trainings that we would do in for the corporation or organization that would be hosting our young people from a nonprofit perspective, or the corporations that are engaging in those spaces from um, really looking at their interactive styles or Myers-Briggs or the DISC assessment, and walking them through even while they're in high school and middle school, what that looks like, what their styles are, what their personalities are, and allowing them to align with their interests and gifts, allow them to see and connect the dots with the why of the work, right? I think a lot of the work, things that we see with our young people today is that they're asking why. Like, why are we here? Why do we have to go to school? Why do we have to get grades? Why do we, right? And so even when we look at it from a systematic standpoint, being able to kind of backdoor it and give our young people and our families the resource to see the approach differently, and how we walk them through that process to identify what and shift in their paradigm, right? And so from their five senses to now understanding perspective and will, and aligning that with their gifts and interests is key, to that process, and therefore the why question is moved because now they're obviously connected to that, and they see the value in themselves, not the system itself, but they see the value in themselves and then what they can offer to their community and abroad.
Jasper, I love that you brought up the why in the context of this conversation. You know, the author Brene Brown often talks about that, you know, unused creativity is not benign, but often it metastasizes and it can turn into grief and anger and shame for young people. And I think one of the most valuable opportunities that we have as leaders of organization is thinking about creating pathways for young people to have access to their greatness, to their why, and really being able to tap into that. And we have another amazing leader and colleague of ours that has joined us, Adero, and I want to start the conversation with you around the why. So talk to us about how City Year is really intentional about helping to make sure that we're navigating with young people through their experiences to tap into that creativity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I apologize. I was a little late. I had some tech issues, but I'm glad to be here. But I think when you're talking about the why and thinking about the work that City Year does with students, we've seen that the social emotional space is needed now more than ever, especially coming out of the pandemic. And students are coming in and they're like, okay, I'm back in the school. I haven't been in the physical school space for a long time. It feels like a really long time. And how do I acclimate myself back into that mode of being in the school space with my colleagues, with teachers, and then having these AmeriCorps members in the school working with you on your academics, working on you on your leadership skills in the school space, and the social emotional piece as well, as you think about this whole school, whole child support in the actual classroom, interventions as it relates to their academic success, interventions as it relates to their leadership. I won't say behavior, I'm going to use the term leadership, and how they operate in the school space with their teachers, with the other leaders in the school, with the AmeriCorps members. And then you think about all the other supports that the school is bringing in to holistically help that child, and getting that young person to understand that, you can achieve in the work that you're doing here in the classroom, and it does have a purpose. Like Jasper just said, kids are always asking, well, why do I have to do this? Why do I don't need calculus. I don't need it. I'll never use it again. Well, it's really about the process of how you go about learning, right? And the learning process was stunted with the pandemic. And a lot of our work that we were doing, whether it's in the schoolhouse or outside, was stunted. So I think us as leaders and as adults who've been in this work for a while, we have to constantly be talking with our young people about, how the world works, why things happen, and their place in how things are impacting them and their leadership and their development.
Yeah, I agree, Adero. I want to pull on a couple of threads of some things that you offered. One is your intentionality about how you're speaking about the work. I know one of the common threads in this group is we all believe in the greatness of young people and, the communities that we have the privilege of being able to step in to provide service and support to. But I think your pause to think about the word was important, because I think our words inform our worlds, right? And so when we think about that in the context of this discussion that we're having around what's happening, the lived experiences for young people in our community, there's a big responsibility that we have as organizations, organizational leaders, to be narrative influencers about how we're having discussions about the communities and the populations that we serve, as we have to address real issues that exist in our community. And so I want to lean into that part of the discussion, Doug, to talk about the role that Boys and Girls Club is playing in terms of really positioning yourself, your platform as a narrative influencer about how we're talking about young people, the families and the communities that we serve. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. That's an important point in general, and very personal to me. In short, no one on this call is setting out to fix broken kids, right? Kids and teens. The narrative right now is is carjackings and violence and those things, which we know are a reality, but the true reality is our young people are surrounded by devastating circumstances that are leading to some tragic outcomes. Another reality is that kids and teens do dumb stuff, right? That's part of growing up and being a kid. We're doing our best to engage the teen population in ways in the club that allows them to elevate their voice, be recognized and be heard. That's one part of our 4-part teen strategy. But that also is an effort to place young people and teens in situations where they can stretch themselves and represent themselves and their peers and have a true voice. So, an example is a young woman in our clubs who had disclosed suicidal ideation and has done a tremendous job getting support. But we have opportunities to place her on youth suicide prevention committees at a national level, to give her a voice and use that. So I think we need to stop looking at our young people as projects or things to be molded or things to be fixed, and humans who we're just here to walk, to Jasper's point, we're walking alongside them in this journey. We're not giving them potential. We're unlocking what they already know. And I think the two most important things in this, and Adero and Jasper already alluded to these. Jasper's talking about Myers-Briggs and those things, and that's about knowing who you are, but we need to know each other, right? You haven't heard a lot about programs yet. You've heard a lot about relationships, right? And that's what concerns me a little bit in our current environments. We're not going to program our way out of this. It's about building relationships with trusted adults. And then to Adero's point, it's also about getting experiences. Like that's how we learn about ourselves too, is getting in those experiences. So programming is one thing for us at Boys and Girls Clubs. That's our third priority, youth development programming. The first is our people, and that's certainly our kids, but it's our staff, because that's who's really building a relationship with our young people. So I think as human service providers, nonprofit organizations, in a challenging workforce environment, we really need to hone in and focus on getting the right people in the right seats, because that's what our young people need right now, is just trusting adults who truly care about them. And last thing, in our club, 97% of kids say they have a trusted adult they can go to in a crisis. That's one of the most important data points I think we have in our organization. If a kid's in a crisis, there's someone in our organization they know that they can go to for help, and I think that says a lot.
Yeah, and I think we're certainly all in agreement on this call in terms of relationships being foundational. I think what's also true is many have represented here on the call the importance of that ecosystem of support. That's as important as we have this conversation about the role that relationships play in the lives of young people. We know, we're convened here today by United Way. They're very invested in student success. And so I'm curious to, hear a soundbite from everyone on the call today in terms of how being part of the United Way network is helping to advance the work of your respective organizations. And I'm going to start with Daniella. And I'd love for everyone to kind of represent your thoughts on that.
Okay, so I like to say that being part of this network allows us to expose our students to more, what was the word that we used? Give them more access to greatness. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's once our students know that they can survive in this world and that they have something to offer, then it gives them that spark, that hope, the thing that they need to engage. So I think it's being a part of this network has strengthened our organization so that we can provide more hope to our teens. We can provide more access to those caring adults who can talk to them and find out what it is they want to do, where they want to go, so that if a teen does not have the desire to go to college, they don't have to feel the pressure of that. We can say, well, what would you like to do? And let us help you find that path to get to where you want to go so that you can discover your greatness. So that's been what is provided for us.
Yeah, I like that stream of thought, Daniella. building hope. What about you, Adero?
Sure. So as a United Way alum, working there for a number of years, I always believed that stories of impact, of how folks that we're serving can share what they're receiving in terms of services, in terms of hope, in terms of being able to move forward in whatever area where they may be having challenges. And United Way does such, being part of that network gives us the opportunity to always be sharing the story of impact.
Right.
Data, we know how great data is in helping us form our programs and being able to make changes in real time and being able to adjust so that we're serving those that we're working with. But really those stories, I believe, they always impact me in how I understand what are our services actually helping under other folks. And United Way has such a large footprint in Franklin County and frankly around the country where they can be another vehicle for sharing those stories of how we're impacting others in the community. So stories of impact really and success really resonate with me and how we work with United Way.
That's spot on, Adero. And I do believe that stories give data the soul, right? That's at the core there. I'm curious, Jasper, your thoughts on the role that United Way plays in helping to advance your work.
Yeah, so extremely grateful and thankful for the work that United Way does and continues to do in our community. I think one of the things that when I think about the impact of United Way in our work is that because we're believers of a village, that it takes a village,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think the United Way is very intentional about creating opportunities and spaces just like this here, right? We see individuals from the village that may be posted in certain spaces doing different things, working with different communities and engaging in different demographics, but being able to come to the same exact table and a table that the United Way provides and also supports and allows for us to sit at from an equitable space. And then, obviously understanding the importance of the village for our young people who are figuring out life, but also dealing with, just the issues and the obstacles that exist. And so to be able to have an experience and a connection with such an amazing organization that allows for them to see that it is possible. The village concept is extremely important. And so from an individual who was previously homeless in high school, right? And understands the importance of a village coming together from your community, from your school, right? From other resources outside of your immediate family or connections that you think you should be connected to on a day-to-day. The importance of the village and the role that United Way plays in that on a bigger scale, but also too at the grassroots level is extremely important.
Yeah, Jasper, I really appreciate you sharing your personal story in the context of your response there. It's important, that village concept. I'm not sure when we moved away from that, but it's critical. I mean, no one can go at it alone. We're having a conversation about organizations that we need each other. There is so much power in collaboration, and it's the same message that we're conveying to young people that are engaging in our programs. And in our organizations, that they don't have to go at it alone. And we're here. And I think also to unpack another piece of what you offered is to do that in the context of an equity-centered discussion and really understanding our role in that space, I just think is really powerful. And want to hear from Doug in terms of your response of being a part of the network and what that means to you.
Yeah, it's a huge part of our work. I agree with all that's been offered up to this point, except Adero, you're an alum. I could never get United Way to hire me, so I'm not an alum. But the work is important, but as important to me, and I think all of us, is how the work is done. And United Way is a great organization with great people and great leaders, and clearly operates with the mission and values out front. And I think we should just acknowledge and thank you for financially investing in us. That's you're trusting us to do our job, and a great partner in that. I don't know that I've had a conversation with Ryan or Dr. Cordes or anybody at United Way who claim to know the answers. But I think we're all convinced the answers are here in town somewhere in our organizations. And we're best served by coming together and staying in our lanes. And United Way, a Central Ohio network, has allowed us to see those lanes so we can focus on our core business and then buddy up alongside those who are doing their work well. And we get a better bang for our buck, and we're helping more kids along the way. So a huge amount of gratitude to United Way and what they're doing in general, and more specifically what they've done for us and the kids we serve.
I appreciate that. You know, Ryan kicked us off on this conversation talking about the role that organizations like ours and many others in the community have played during the COVID pandemic and in response to the immediate needs and even broader needs that have surfaced in our communities as a result of the impact of COVID. And I'm sure, we have a ton of folks on the call here that are representatives from organizations that are embedded in the community. My question to I want to start with Adero is, how can we ensure that providers, organizations like the ones represented on this call today and even beyond have the support that they need to continue to provide service in our community?
That's a great question. And one of the, in 26 years of nonprofit, I think even though the pandemic has been a challenge for a lot of us in the nonprofit space, one of the pieces I feel that really was illuminated and I was proud to see is that organizations like United Way, Columbus City Schools, and others mobilized nonprofits in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. And the support that we shared with each other, the support that we showed, the resources, all of the coordination was amazing over the past couple of years. And I think being able to continue those opportunities, making sure that we're still in these spaces together, that we're still sharing ideas and resources and programming and linkages. I think we saw a lot of linkages over the past couple of years, and it was different previous to that, but this really showed the power that nonprofits had in the space as it relates to how the pandemic fleshed out for many folks in our community. But I think moving forward, I think Doug alluded to it, continuing to invest in the work that we're doing financially. I'm going to borrow United Way's tagline, the giving, the advocating, the volunteering, the data matched with the stories. I think all of our organizations have that within our toolboxes, and for the community to continue to support us as we do that work, because we're mobilized. I think we've done it excellently over the past couple of years, and we're not siloed. Some folks might want to say we might have been siloed in the past. We're all doing our own little thing. I feel a little differently about that now. So I can see how my program links with a boys club or a Big Brothers Big Sisters better than I probably could have thought about it, 5 or 10 years ago. And then the diversity pieces come to light. We're seeing that as well. That's become more prominent in our work. So we're infusing those diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces into our work. So I think that's very important. So as we're continuing to do that, as long as we're sharing resources, advocating for more financial assistance, helping grow our staff professionally, looking to make sure that our data and stories, that they're married, and that we're constantly giving that information out to everyone that's been a champion for the work that we're doing, I think we'll start to see even more gains in this work moving forward.
That's right. And I think it reinforces what Jasper talked about earlier in terms of our village, right? That our village is strengthened when you have these sorts of supports offered to organizations like ours. I'm gonna toss over to you, Jasper, just reaction, building on a little bit of what Adero offered in terms of the people listening here on this call today are curious about how they continue to show up in support for organizations. And so what might you have to offer to the conversation around that in particular?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think Adero teed it up great, right? Just looking at the dynamics of the systems that exist, and making sure that we continue to support, any means necessary. I think thinking about what the pandemic created, right, for us to actually see across the board. Everybody knew the need there, right? We knew that every student needed a device, right, to use and to support their education and academic services. But until we got pinched into an environment where we had to, then obviously the collective concept, the village concept for everybody to come together and figure it out together, right, was key, and it happened like this, right, and so really thinking about, we call them COVID keepers, right, really thinking about those certain things that happened during COVID that allowed us to see our work differently. And I think the most important, from a systematic standpoint, we looked at it differently, but more importantly, I think it calls for us to look at ourselves differently. And so for those individuals who are, in multiple ways, whether it's volunteering and supporting, whether it's financially supporting, whether it's through different, systems and that and organization components that are created, really looking at the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. We are constantly trying to charge people to just keep looking at yourself, keep digging into yourself and the work that you're doing, and really allow that to be the driving force, and asking yourself and the people around you the questions, right, that are centered around the work that we're doing together and how it is impacting those that are around us in that space, right? We're really pushing this narrative. We actually have an entrepreneurship conference on Friday coming up here in the city, because a number of us came together and said, we've got to create a space where these entrepreneurs are able to have a conversation around collaboration versus competition. Right. And I think it goes for every single space, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's government, whether it's our entrepreneurs and education space, like really looking at how are we collectively collaborating for the work that we're doing that creates a sustainable model, right? That's not for the moment, right? But it's continued to sustain each other, right? And the communities and people that we're serving on.
Powerful, Jasper. That collective impact conversation, I think, is just so incredibly critical during this time. I don't think there's a space where we move from service to solving without having that conversation around the collaboration. I think to, maybe just reinforce two of the points that you talked about in terms of introspection is king in this conversation. Starts at the individual level, but it really navigates through thinking about organization and community, and how do we lean into that, and how do we do that comprehensively, and then also thinking about what our role is in the solution as well. So I really appreciate that perspective. I know we have people on the call that are thinking about, you have amazing organizations represented here, centered in the work, wanting to do more work, certainly wanting to show up for this community in broader ways. And so if someone is interested in engaging, Daniella, we'll start off with you. What are the opportunities that exist within your organizations for folks that are saying, yep, I'm ready to think about my role in the solution. How do I play a part here?
Okay, well, I would like to say that we serve the community Monday through Friday between 3 and 6 p.m. So when our kids get out of school, they come to our site, and we will have them for 3 hours a day. So we invite the community to come in, share your story, talk about your career, what you did to get to where you are, what you love about your job, expose our students to greatness. Let them know what they could do if they followed in your footsteps. We're on site at the schools Monday through Friday during the school day, but I think the most impact could be had by having a face-to-face conversation with the team, getting an opportunity to hear from them, and then share. We would love to have some site visits. And so if you're open to having our students out to explore, that would be wonderful. But just come out and have some conversations.
I appreciate you sharing the resources, and I'm sure that United Way, as a follow-up to this discussion today, will provide some links to access to our organizations. But Doug, tell us, for somebody that's ready to, roll up their sleeves and lean into your work, what are those opportunities? What does that look like in your shop?
Yeah, so I would say first, prioritize our young people, and here's a clue on what your priorities are. It's where you spend your time, where you spend your money, and what you think about. So you're here, so we got some of your time, and you're thinking about our kids, individually or corporately. Invest in the clubs, invest in City Year and United Way, all the organizations here. We need your investment, and we do need your time. Our young people need social capital, right? And the type of social capital that will help them climb the economic ladder. We know we need to get those rungs closer together as we get to the top of that ladder, right? For some of our young people, those rungs get further and further part of the way up. Like similar to all that, and Daniella, we operate 3 to 7 Monday through Friday during the school year, and all day Monday through Friday during the summer. But we're looking for folks who can expose our young people to new experiences, new perspectives. But I would also say folks that are willing to come in and learn from our young people and learn their perspective, because our young folks have a lot to say and a lot of important knowledge that we need to capture. So if you're engaging with our young people in Boys and Girls Clubs, we would hope that you would come in with the anticipation of being impacted equally or more so than our young people are being impacted by you being there.
I love that as a pivot to hear from Darrow and City Year is positioning our work as, we're all in this space of being bridge builders, right? And we're building bridges across difference all of the time. And I do believe, and I know my colleagues on the call here as well, that the learning does happen on both sides of that. So that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing. Darrow, what about City Year? Ready to engage, ready to lean in? What do you have for us?
Sure, absolutely. Well, due to COVID, it's because our work is primarily in the schoolhouse, it's kind of challenging to work with students, in the school space. But I will share that concurrent to our work with the young people in the schools, the students, we also have to remember, and I have a picture you can see behind us, one of our AmeriCorps members in the red jackets. We have young folks that are actually going through the service, facilitating the work in the schools. So there's development of the students in the school space, but there's also leadership development and opportunities to work with our AmeriCorps members as they're, they're young folks as well that are learning, developing, growing their skills. So we have quite a few opportunities as it relates to, we have a mentoring program, a professional mentoring program that you can connect with an AmeriCorps member and help guide them in their professional and their service experience. We have career affinity groups where you can work with an AmeriCorps member in networking or how to write a quality resume or practice your interviewing skills, things of that nature. And we also have opportunities. So if you want to get connected more to the work, even though COVID's making it challenging, we have, these City Year in Action or virtual school tours. We talked about telling the story, sharing the narrative, an opportunity to actually hear what the AmeriCorps members experiencing as they're working with students, right? So those are opportunities that allow you to be proximate to the work and to actually help those develop that are facilitating the work. So, because we have to build a couple of the young people that are actually being the mentors to the students in the school space. So those are just a few opportunities.
Yeah, and I appreciate City Year's innovation and being able to create those virtual experiences for folks to still engage and see what happens boots on the ground in the schools as it relates to your AmeriCorps members. Jasper, would love for you to chime in, tell us, how can we be in service and in support to the work you're doing?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. It kind of piggybacks on, obviously what has already been offered here. Obviously, one of the things that I would suggest too, along with, giving your time, giving your resources and funds, obviously being present, identifying ways to come in and engage with our young people in these spaces, is to also just advocate. Like really picking up the flag of advocacy for our young people in our communities. There's a lot of negative narrative and perspectives and perception around our youth, specifically in our urban, communities. And I think one of the things that's really important that we want to charge people to do to really support the work is to help to change the narrative. I mean, you help to change the narrative by advocating and speaking, right, your experience, right, from a positive perspective with young people in our communities. And so, if you haven't had a positive experience, run over to all that. If you haven't had a positive experience, go over to the Boys and Girls Club and engage yourself in a mentorship experience with big brothers and big sisters or City Year, and then change the story that you're able to tell around their lives and their experience. And then you just become that voice in your inner circle, in your community, at your table for dinner, or at your corporation or job, to change the perspective and perception that people have about what's happening with our young people. And I think that is foundational to really shifting in the work that we're doing, is helping people to change that perspective and that narrative, and then also to advocate an understanding for the mental health. Right. I would obviously getting off of this space and not speaking about the importance of us as organizations and the work that we're doing, really pushing the needle around the need for mental health services and access to not just our students and our young people that we're serving, but our families. Right? I don't know how many times I've walked into schools and organizations over the last few weeks, and there's fights and young people getting shot, and all kind of things that are happening, but it's just simply because they're not able to deregulate and be able to talk to themselves and process through what they're dealing with due to the pandemic and being isolated and all that other stuff, but really allowing for individuals in our community to advocate towards access to mental health. And we're doing a lot of that work, trying to identify and partnering with an awesome organization, National Telehealth Solutions, to provide that 24/7, 365 access to our students and our families. And we think that is extremely important. And so we would ask people to also advocate in that space as well.
Yeah, Jasper, I think two key things that you mentioned that I wanted to lift, and that is, the shift requires proximity to the challenge, and I think that that's important to underscore as you've offered there. But what I appreciate is the normalizing of the conversation around mental well-being and how that has been elevated during this time. And so, I want to dial back into the group and talk a little bit more about, we're represented here, the adults kind of speaking on behalf of our young people. But what I also know is true is that we are engaging with our young people, and that youth voice in the context of our work and our strategy and how we inform our work is really critical. So, I'm going to kick us off with the Darrow here. Tell us a little bit about, from the youth voice perspective, this conversation that Jasper is introducing to the group discussion here around the importance of child well-being holistically, but really centering down in the mental health discussion.
That's a great question. And I think when you're talking about, so I'm gonna just use myself as an example, and I'm gonna lean to the Boys and Girls Club, because I went to the Boys Club for years when I was a young person. And I know that having an adult listen to you, if there's a challenge, I know I've gone into rec centers and other organizations where, as a young person, they were always invested in me. They want to see me develop from sports and how I interact with others. Young people, if I get an altercation or a fight or something like that, and I'm feeling a little stressed, who is there to help me, like Dr. said, regulate that? Who is looking out for my mental health outside of my home or outside of my school, where, I can be in the space with the peers, right? So, sometimes I'm with my friends, I'm with my boys. Do I really want to talk about how I'm feeling with, a counselor or a program manager? But I think our staff, they're very, very skilled at being able to pull that young person aside and say, hey, let's go shoot some free throws and let's talk about what's going on with you today, right? It doesn't look like we're talking about those things, so you don't have to feel challenged by that, but we can still address what's mentally, you came in angry today, what's going on? Is something going on in school, something going on at home? How can we connect on that? Let's put you, what do you like to do that we can connect with? And let me slowly start to understand how I can be more helpful to you as a young person. And I know I experienced that a lot in a lot of the programs and organizations that I was able to connect with. And that's one of the things that our AmeriCorps members do a lot with, for students having challenges in the classroom, hey, let's step out let's do a little walk and talk. Let's kind of get you, you calm down. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with you, or maybe change the subject, get you back in the classroom so that you can now be ready to learn, because that's, the main thing. But those things have to run parallel, right? And, we say, well, how do we measure a young person's mental aptitude or where they are in the space? We have the DESA, we have all these different tools that can help with how a student is feeling about themselves. But in the moment, I think, understanding how our staff are, and other organizations and their staff are very well trained and astute at seeing where the student is or the young person is in that moment or in that situation, and understanding what they're bringing into the space and how you can help. You may not be able to be at home with them, but while they're with you, hopefully those mental health and social, emotional, and leadership skills that the staff are bringing to the table can help them as they're navigating these challenging streets. Let's be honest, it's hard in the streets right now in Columbus, Ohio, for a lot of young people. But how are they using that leadership and that social, emotional muscle? How are they building that so that they're navigating a little bit better outside of our respective programming?
Yeah, and I think that emotional literacy is critical in this conversation, right? Being able to not only, we talked about normalizing the conversation, but access to education, information, understanding, how this energy showing up needs a word, right? We need to know how this is interacting in this space that we're in right now. And to your point, I do believe that a regulated adult helps regulate a young person. And so, the power of the adult influence in the context of this conversation is critical. I want to dive in, to hear from all the voices on the call today as we're, still navigating through a pandemic. I would love for us to be on a call here in the future where we're talking about COVID as being something that's, in the rear view mirror for us. And we will find an opportunity to do that for sure. But there's a reality that we're facing right now in terms of where we're centered currently. And before we toss it back over to Ryan here, only because it's appropriate, because Doug's sitting and, the sunshine has, highlighted him. I want to hear your message about, as we're, still centered in crisis. There's a whole lot of hope embedded in the narrative and the story about what's next for our community. And so just a soundbite of what are you hopeful for? And then we'll toss it over to Ryan to close us out.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and sorry, I realize it's probably hard to see me, but it's pleasant, so I'm gonna stay here. I'll try to be brief, Elizabeth. When you said that, my mind immediately went back to a reading I read almost daily in 2020 from Howard Thurman, and it's called The Seed of the Jack Pine. And I won't read the whole thing to you, but in essence, the vast majority of jack pine seed trees stands are from forest fires. So the pine cones themselves won't open unless they're heated, and the sunlight isn't enough heat. So it takes a traumatic forest fire to open the pine cones, and those tall trees grow. And Jasper, I don't know his exact words, but said something earlier that made me think, and I think he would agree. My hope is, one, we have amazing young people and amazing organizations supporting those young people, and amazing organizations supporting the organizations that support the young people. But I have no aspirations to go back to what we were, right? We don't want to do pre-COVID. Schools the schools, the disparities and the broken systems, the disproportionate rates of disciplinary actions amongst young men of color, all that happened before the pandemic too. I don't want to go back to that. We have a huge opportunity here. We were completely disrupted. We have a huge opportunity to do something great here and do it differently. The slate is largely clean. So I'm excited about the opportunity that the folks in this call present, in that we can now come together and at least in my career now, there's not been anything more traumatic than globally than this pandemic, right? So we get to start over, and maybe we try something new, and there's no dumb ideas. Let's figure out what works and go do it.
Thank you. Brian, you're going to take us home here?
I can. Thank you all so much for the conversation. You guys were talking about the benefits of being part of the United Way network and all of those things. And my best part of being a United Wayer is being in relationship with all of you, and just the conversation that you all were having. And we talked about a little bit prep call. I miss you all, to be honest with you, being around tables with all of you, being able to share ideas. I miss that. I'm glad that we do have this format to be able to share this time together. But the best part of being a United Way staffer is really being in relationship with all of you. You guys have reminded us of the importance of togetherness. You guys talked about it. No one organization can tackle the issues that we're talking about alone. And so I just continue to be thankful that we're in relationship with you. I learn from you every time that we're in conversation, and I hope that's been the same for all of our viewers. Thanks to all of our panelists for participating. Elizabeth, thank you for shepherding us through the conversation today. We hope for all of those who are tuning in have enjoyed the conversation, learned more about how we all can support this critical work. Just as a reminder, United Way has been committed to kids and families in Central Ohio for nearly 100 years, and are committed to working side by side with our community and for our community toward a better tomorrow. It was mentioned before, United Way brings together donors, volunteers, advocates, nonprofits, leaders, and more to take on some of Central Ohio's toughest challenges. And so if you do want to plug into any of these organizations or others, we can help to get you there. I know that some links have been provided in the chat. Again, to all of you, we hope today's been valuable to you, that you'll continue to join us for future conversations like this one that can be found at liveunitedcentralohio.org/events. I know that this group has talked about the potential of this being a springboard for future, potentially a series in 2022. There were a lot of things that were discussed today, but we know, and I think that as a group, we were pretty interested in doing that. And so stay tuned for all of that. We know that the community's stronger when we show up united. And that's all we've got today. So thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.